Amy Smith will be presenting, and she's one of our newer extension educators at the Torrington Extension Office in Goshen County. But she's been teaching for at least a decade ahead of that, and she has a plethora of information. She has also been doing a research project at the Sarek Research Station at Lingle on pollinators that started last summer as a partnership with the Xerces Society and our extension research educators. So we'll turn it over to you, Amy.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Good. Good. Everybody in the right class? Creating pollinator habitat? What Donna didn't say is that I am also an insect nerd. We really like that. There's a few of us in extension, but we gotta stick together. Because not a lot of people like insects, but we like a lot of them. So today we're going to go over creating pollinator habitat, and my purpose for this presentation was to give you an overview of things that you should consider when creating pollinator habitat. And not necessarily a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of how you actually do it, but things to consider as you go ahead and plan what you want to do for your own space, okay? Let's go ahead and get started. Whoops, nope, the other one. There we go. So first, the importance of pollinators. Everybody likes to look at a butterfly, right? Because they're pretty, and everybody knows what a butterfly is. Well, here is a few things that make all of the rest of the pollinating insects important. They are crucial in ecosystems and in agriculture for several reasons. Pollinators, not only do they transfer pollen, which then increases food production, okay? They're essential for fruit, vegetable, nut, seed production, and genetic diversity. And actually, most of our crops in agriculture have evolved to need pollinators, okay? There's very few self-pollinating crops anymore. So whatever variety they are, whatever variety the insects are, the plants have evolved to need them. Second is that the presence of pollinators can significantly increase the yield. So we know that wind also pollinates crops. We don't have much wind here in Wyoming, right? Just maybe a little bit. And so wind can pollinate some crops like tomatoes, all right? Water can pollinate tomatoes. It's a terrible pollination plan, but it can happen. And so with the presence of pollinators, it just increases your yields, okay? And especially if you're trying to increase your yields of fruits and vegetables. Ecosystem stability, pollinators help maintain structure and function of the ecosystem. And with that, the reproduction of plants. Okay, a lot of insects are actually used as indicator species for ecosystem health, and you could actually parallel that into your garden. Okay, the more insects you have, the more beneficial insects you have, because there are some not so good insects, right? The more beneficial insects you have, the healthier your ecosystem, henceforth the healthier your plants are going to be, right? So it's an A plus B equals C situation, okay? Biodiversity, the more diversity you have in an ecosystem, obviously the healthier it's going to be. The less that you have, the more able it is to crash, and then it's going to take more energy to try and bring it back up to speed. Economic value, crop production, kind of an important deal, right? Like we all like to eat. I know I do. So, and it's especially important for those home gardeners. My mother-in-law has had a hard time with her garden recently, and the woman is an extraordinary gardener, okay? But we don't tend to have a ton of, I guess what you would call aesthetically pleasing beneficial insects. We don't have a lot of butterflies and a lot of bees and a lot of those types of things because we live out on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. Now we have bumblebees and we have a lot of other things, but it's just important to have more pollinators, okay? Also, in industry. How many of you guys have bees? Anybody a beekeeper in here? You was, okay, you were. Ecotourism. Anybody been to an insectarium before? I go to New Orleans and like that's the first place I want to go. And in fact, I drug a whole group, right? And so ecotourism is important. And then also in botanical medicine, okay? There's a lot of pollinator coinciding with medical medicine. Okay, apitherapy. Anybody ever heard of apitherapy? Okay, they're experimenting a lot with diabetes. Okay, and a newly diagnosed individual, if they do apitherapy, it seems to delay their need for insulin. Now that is up and coming and there's a lot of research still, but just keep these things in mind. These are why we need pollinators, okay? And then of course we all like ladybugs and butterflies and dragonflies and all those things that make us happy, right? Not maybe the grasshoppers when they stick to your fingers when they jump by. Any questions on this so far? No? Okay. So, site location. Where do you want to actually plan your pollinator habitat? This is very important. And the first thing you need to do is evaluate the space that you have. Okay? You can go ahead and put it anywhere you want, but if you follow this methodical approach, it will help you to have a more, a better actual location to continue your pollinator situation. Consider factors such as sunlight exposure. Do insects need sunlight? Do bees fly at night? They absolutely do not fly at night. So you need to consider your sunlight exposure. Most insects in the morning will have a dew. If there's any humidity in the air, they will have a dew on them, and they need that sunlight to dry off that dew, warm up themselves before they can then go and do what they need to do, okay? Because they're cold-blooded, they need that sun for warmth. So soil type, moisture levels, existing vegetation. Soil type matters because not all plants like the same type of soil, right? More clay type soils do not drain as well, but they hold more nutrients. Sandy type soils drain really, really well, but they don't hold very many nutrients, right? And very rarely do we have the perfect loamy type soil, okay? Then, of course, pH comes into existence, and we have a whole plethora of things that go along with that. You need to also choose a location in your property that has at least 6 or more hours of sunlight. That's very important. Take note of how the sunlight moves across your location that you're thinking about, and this is an image. And these pictures are probably taken at least every hour, and it shows how the sunlight moves through your area. So, are you probably going to want to put a pollinator habitat back in here? Not unless you want a shade garden, okay? And you're going to want to think about shade all day long, because that might get a little warm. So these are some of the things to consider. Even if you have to go out and take pictures every hour, every 2 hours to see how that sun moves through your property, I would say that's pretty important, and that will give you a good idea of where your plot should be, okay? As you do that, you might want to draw a diagram. I am a huge proponent of paper. I really like paper. I like to draw things out. I like to see how it's going to work. I'm a very visual person. So you might want to draw a diagram of how you think this is going to play out in addition to your pictures, and then you can make a very good educated guess as to where a successful pollinator plot should be. Okay? Invest in a soil test. They're not that expensive in the general scheme of things, and it will tell you if you need amendments, okay? If you need more organic material to help hold your moisture holding capacity, okay? The more organic matter you have, it acts like a sponge, it holds water, and it holds more nutrients, which are gonna help your plants, which are then gonna help your pollinators, okay? Let's see. Also, you're going to want to control vegetation. Anybody here have a weed or two? Yeah, I think we all do, right? And so they're easy to control sometimes. Sometimes they're easy to control, sometimes they're not easy to control. Now, whether that looks like you go in with a chemical and you control it fast and quick, or you put a thick mulch down, or you put some plastic down to control those weeds, what you're still looking at is that soil seed bank. So if you've ever had one weed go to seed, now you're dealing with all of the seeds that went into that soil bank. So think about what you have, think about what you've had in the past, and then make a plan as to how you're going to deal with that moving forward. I have brome grass at my house. Across the county road, I have dug that brome grass, and I have dug that brome grass, and I have dug that brome grass out of my flower gardens. And I mean, literally dug the brome grass. Well, it reproduces by rhizomes, which are those runners underneath the ground. And it comes back healthier than ever. In fact, I've got better brome grass in my flower beds than I have in my yard. So these are the things that you need to think about as you move forward. You know, not just those easy to kill dandelions or puncture vine or those type of things, the things that you're going to have to control year after year after year, okay? Identify any potential obstacles or challenges. Shade, right? You're not going to plant a sun-loving plant in a shady location. It's just not going to be happy, okay? If that plant doesn't get sunlight during some part of the day, it's going to be a little tough to try and get some pollinators there too. Now, are there shady gardens? Yep. Okay, but keep that in mind. Any buildings that you have to work around. Buildings retain heat, but they also cast a shadow. Okay, those are things to consider. Weed control, we already talked about that. Any invasive species. I mean, we don't live in sunny California, so we don't really have to worry about bamboo, right? That's not a problem for us. However, we may have to worry about spurge, or we may have to worry about toad flax, or we may have to worry about lots of things. So make a list of all of the obstacles that you may have to overcome and methodically work through how you're going to control them. Okay, any questions? Okay. Oh, this, before I move on, this image up here is just a bird's eye view of a property. All of the items that are located, the building, some shrubs, walkways, a driveway, and then how the buildings cast shade and where all the sunlight is. So that's just a different version of how you can catalog your obstacles. Yes?
I don't know if this is the right time to ask it, but I have a plant growth, native plants for my pollinator garden. And it's grown something, I didn't bring my map, but one plant is growing 7 feet tall. Now, should I have kept that cut down the last few years, or should I get some, you know, those holes, the top of leg wires have holes and they go up through them? Or?
I would say it probably depends on what kind of plant it is.
Okay.
Some plants like to be cut off annually so that they can regrow and they will only flower off of the new growth. Some plants don't like to be pruned because the flowers will only flower on the second year growth. So it really depends on what kind of plant you have. So you should probably do a little research on that. And if you have any questions, you can certainly contact your extension educator in Sheridan County. And if they have any questions, they can certainly reach out to myself or Jenny Thompson or Donna Hoffman in Natrona County. We can certainly help you.
Thank you.
Okay? Any other questions? Nope. Okay. So after you've done an assessment of your site, you know all the things you're going to do, right? You've controlled all the weeds. You've got this planned out. Here's what you're actually going to do. You're going to create a plan, whether that's in your head, whether that's in a notebook, whether that's on the computer, in a landscaping computer program. It doesn't matter how it's done, but you're going to create a plan. I, again, like paper, so I like to sketch these things out. You're going to sketch a rough design of the area. You're going to include any structures that are already there, any potential plant life that you want to put in there that is already there, any available space, any existing features that you want to keep. Okay? So then you're going to determine a rough design of your flower beds. All right? Got it? Pathways, any water features, any permanent features that you want to keep. Consider incorporating functional and aesthetic designs. Now, what I mean by functional is you could have a trellis for a climbing plant. That's functional, right? Seating areas, focal points, decorative features. A lot of people like garden art, okay? A lot of people like pathways. A lot of people like to create little seating nooks so that they can go out and read books or have afternoon coffee. So these are all of the things that you want to consider as you're creating your plan. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? Any questions about that? There are some programs, some computer programs that you can do this on if you are pretty zippy with a computer, or I actually like to just get graph paper. This might actually mean that you go out with a tape measure and like measure your space so that you can accurately plan for the space that you have. I always say, I'm not going to get too many flowers this year. And then I buy the flowers that I think I need, and then I get home and I start panicking because I don't have enough flowers, right? Because I forgot something. And so then I always have to go back, and then I end up with too many flowers. And I'm like, oh, gee, now I have too many flowers, right? Darn. And my husband's like, really, you needed all these flowers? And I'm like, yeah, I did. Yeah, because I panicked. So if you plan this out well, you are going to know what you need, okay? Now, the selection of plants. This is where everybody gets super excited. This is where I get excited. And I also panic a little bit. I just told you that. So when you are thinking about the types of plants that you want to put in your pollinator garden, first and foremost, I think that you should consider whether you want native plants or whether you want non-native plants, or if you want a mixture of both. Okay, one of the benefits of having native plants is the native pollinators of the area will migrate to those plants first because they have co-evolved together through the years. Okay, it is the best source of food for those native pollinators. Now, are those always easy to grow? Nope. Are they always easy to purchase? Not always, right? Not always. In addition to that, native plants are climate ready. They know our elevation. They know our climate. They've evolved in this area. There's a reason why they have evolved in this area. There's a reason why they bloom. Okay? So that's a benefit. That's something to think about. The next thing you should do is select a diverse group of plants. You should think about providing different plants that have different food qualities. Pollen, some insects really, they need pollen as food. Some insects or pollinators, i.e. Hummingbirds need nectar. Bees actually need nectar also. Okay, so consider providing a selection of plants that have nectar, pollen, and habitat resources throughout the season. Okay, this is why we have cool and warm season plants.
Is there a table somewhere that you can quick look and say, check, this one has better habitat, better pollen, better nectar?
I believe we have one of these in our Promoting Pollinators on Your Place booklet we have. I don't know that I have enough today, but we can take your name and number and we can certainly mail some to you. There are tables that have been put together by previous extension educators or current extension educators, such as Jenny in the back here. And there are tables, gotta find them here real quick. Continual supply of flowering plants. And there are annuals on here, there are perennials in here, there are shrubs, and there are some flowering trees. Okay, so this is a pretty extensive resource. I chose not to put it in here because everybody would be going, what? I can't read that, right? I would also be standing up here going, I can't read that. So I have some pollinator booklets, and if we happen to run out, we can definitely take down your name and number and mail them to you, okay?
It's also online. If you picked up any of the magazines downstairs at the registration desk, it has our URL at the bottom. And if you go to that website and you click on Pollinator Guide, you'll find that chart as a separate file. You'll find the whole Pollinator Guide is up there as other resources that'll help you choose plants.
I forgot that it's online. Thank you. Thank you. And then you can just save it on your computer or print it out and have it right there. Okay? Where did I leave off here? You threw me off, David.
Diverse selection.
Yeah. No, we're good. Nectar, pollen, habitat throughout the growing season. Also consider different flower shapes, sizes, and colors. Okay? Bees like more flat, no, not bees. Butterflies like more flat flowers so that they can land. Okay? Bees will take whatever they can get. Hummingbirds like the tubular flowers. Okay? So consider all of the shapes when you are looking for your flowers. Also, clustered flowers, right? Like the wallflower. The native flower, the wallflower. It's got a cluster of yellow florets at the top. That works too. Consider daytime versus nighttime flowering plants. Why might we do that?
They're blooming during the night, and bees don't fly at night, they wouldn't be using them.
Bees don't fly at night, so the bees are not going to be the pollinators. But do we have any pollinators that fly at night?
Those moth hummingbirds?
Bats and moths. Okay? Some moths are during the day, but a lot of moths fly at night. So consider that. Now, there is one type of plant in its native habitat. It's a nicotina plant that actually can change the time of day that it blooms. It generally blooms during the day so that the moths can come in, or the butterflies can come in and pollinate it. Well, then they lay their eggs on it. And so then their little eggs hatch into little caterpillars. And what do little caterpillars do? Munch on the plants, right? So at a certain point in time, after it's been eaten, a certain percentage, the plant goes, whoa, I'm done. We're not doing this anymore. And what it will do is it will start to change when it flowers. And it happens fairly rapidly. And so it will start to flower during, whichever one it flowers, either at night it'll flower during the day, or if it flowers during the day, it'll flower at night. And so then it attracts different pollinators that do not use it as habitat or egg laying habitat for its young. Okay, so do a little research on the plants that you're looking for. Make sure that you actually group plants that have similar needs. If you have plants that need full sun, like full sun, you're not going to plant it in the shade. It's not going to do well. Okay, if you need plants that have some sun tolerance, but not full sun, you need to have either morning shade or afternoon shade, depending on what that plant needs. Also consider watering needs. Some plants do not like to have their feet wet all the time. Some plants love to have their feet wet. So you probably wouldn't want to plant, I don't know, black-eyed Susans next to a pond. They don't necessarily like to have their little feet wet, but irises can. They like it marshy. Okay, so those are the types of things to consider, their moisture needs. Also, this is going to tie back to the soil test. Okay, your water holding capacity, your nutrients, that type of thing. Yep, that's good. Consider a mix of annuals, perennials, shrubs, and trees. You don't want to have to be replacing all of these flowers every single year. Some of them are fine. Right? Some of them are fine. Some of them you want to plant one time, nurture them, and help them grow. That way they're there all year, or year after year after year. Everybody knows the difference between annuals and perennials. Annuals take one season to flower, grow, set seeds, and then they die. Perennials, their lifespan is at least 3 years. Like the first year you plant them, they sleep. The second year they creep, and the third year they leap. Everybody's heard that, okay? Why would we put shrubs and trees in our pollinator?
They provide like a buffer.
They can provide a wind buffer. They also can flower, right? Like Wigalias flower, okay? We're going to get to more on that a little later. But they also add vertical layers. We tend to think, and I fall into this category as well, that we should only think about horizontal layers. Okay? What it looks like when I'm looking at my pollinator garden. But think about how you can add those vertical layers too. Insects don't just think in a horizontal pattern. Okay? Some habitats, some insects like to fly high for protection from predators, right? So think about how you can get a little height in there. It doesn't have to be like sky high, and it doesn't have to be terribly high, but just get a little height in there. Whether that's in plants, whether that's in trees, whether that's in structures, it doesn't matter what it is, but just keep that in mind as we move forward. There was something else that I actually wanted to talk about with the plants. Nope, I think that's all. Okay. Any questions so far? I've kind of thrown a lot of material at you. The main thing is the more diverse your habitat, the more pollinators you're going to have, the better able it is going to withstand disturbance too, okay? A more natural ecosystem or a more diverse ecosystem always withstands disturbance better, okay? Any questions? Nope.
Well, I was going to ask, is there good resources on where you can find native plants or native pollinator plants? And is that something our local nurseries typically will carry?
They probably will carry some varieties of them, and there is a nursery. Yes, ma'am.
Piney Island.
Yes.
Yeah, Piney Island is local here.
It's a store.
So
it's really
you can
good
go
knowledge.
online and to that Barnyards Backyards site again. And so if you go on there's a book that we put out that's called Plants with Altitude. It's about native plants. And so if you go on to our site and you click on that, there's a whole page that's lists nurseries. So what we did is we asked all the conservation districts and extension folks and said, hey, where do you get your plants? And then we listed the plants there that were nurseries. And then we also, there's another page that lists seed sources if you want to grow your plants from seed.
What's that, what website?
It's Barnyards, you just Google Barnyards Backyards Wyoming and it'll pull up.
Oh,
On the back of your.
Yeah, if you grab any of the magazines down at the registration table, it has the URL at the bottom.
Thank
There's
you.
lots of stuff on there.
Alicia Bretzman will be out here at the college selling a lot of species of, they're all native, in first 2 weeks, sometime in the first 2 weeks of May.
And those are actually where we got our plants for the pollinator plot at Sarek in Lingle. And we got them and they were in these tiny little tubes and these tiny little top growth. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm not sure how this is gonna work. But I will tell you, I was pleasantly surprised. We had very little loss. Very, very little loss, and it is on a south exposure of a geodesic high tunnel, if you will, and they got washed out, and I mean gully washer washed out at least 3 times, and we still have a good retention. And I was just out there the other day, and they're coming back. I was rifling through my little plants, and then I went, oh gosh, it's still March, cover them back up, because I was starting to get a little spring fever. So
I was shocked that my Indian paintbrush grew from her. I just didn't think.
I've bought quite a few things from her too.
Yeah. So
And I can give you her
Landis will
information.
carry them
after
here
this if
too
you're
locally.
interested. Yeah,
In the
she's,
conservation
yeah.
district, we include
She's
both
right
packages
here.
from her as
Yeah.
part of our tree program, a pollinator package through her.
perfect. So there's lots of resources here. So that's exciting, actually.
And you don't have to just stick with native plants. There's a lot of non-natives that pollinators love, including all the native ones. So I grow Walker's Low Catnip, and I'll see every kind of pollinator, hummingbirds, hawk moths, native bees, honeybees, everybody's there, so.
I put out a lot of petunias because I live where it's really super sandy. And they're not particularly my favorite type of flower, but listen, if you can't beat them, you might as well join them. And that is what I have done in my life. And they're showy and the pollinators love them. And so I said petunias. They're probably one of my least favorite flowers in the universe, but can't beat them, you just join them. That's what you do. So again, we talk about the native plants, but like Jenny said, put a mixture out there. That's perfectly fine. I mean, there's a million varieties of penstemon. There's native penstemon, and then there's other non-native penstemon. That's fine. There's still penstemon, right? So just make sure to put a variety of pollen and nectar. That's number 1 important. Colors, number 2 important, right? Because different insects are attracted to different colors. Like butterflies, David's gonna correct me right here, right now, and that's okay. Butterflies like red and orange and yellow flowers. Bees tend to go towards purple and blue flowers because bees can see a bee violet color that is unique to bees and bees only. Okay? And we can't always see them, but flowers have a UV aspect to them, UV light aspect to them, in which if you look at this aster up here, we can't see it, right? It just looks purple. But around the center, if we could see in a UV light, there would be a UV blue color in there, or whatever color the insect can see in, that basically is like a landing pad for insects to call it in. Okay? And so that's important to know, which is why you want a plethora of different flower types. Now, I have a picture up here with a dandelion on it. That might make some people cringe a little bit, like, oh, is that really a flower? It is a flower. Is it a desirable flower? Maybe if you make dandelion wine, I mean, it could be, right? But those are also one of the very first things to come up and provide pollen and nectar for insects. So it's kind of important. Okay? Those are the very first things that I see pollinators on in my neck of the woods. And this conglomeration of images, I'm a very visual person, so I like visual things in my presentations. And what I tried to do is I tried to include a lot of the different pollinators, at least the categories of pollinators. And on the aster up top is a little skipper. It's a butterfly. Okay? Then we've got a fly over here. Actually, it might be a bee. I think it's a bee because there's 4 wings. Bats. We don't think about bats often. I happen to really like bats and get really excited when we have bats at our house because we have a lot of mosquitoes. So I get really excited when I have bats. Not that they're pollinating, still like bats. Beetles. A lot of people do not think about beetles as being pollinators. Now they may be accidental pollinators, or they may actually need the pollen. Okay, ants are another one that I did not stick up here. Okay, hummingbirds, everybody loves a good hummingbird. Do you guys get hummingbirds up here?
Yes.
Yes. They tell me we get hummingbirds in Torrington, but I don't know that I've actually seen very many of them, and I don't get them. I live south of Torrington. I don't get them there at all. Wasps. Also a good source of pollinators. Okay, and then the little hawk moth guy. You gotta stick those guys in there. And there's a million, those are just the main categories. Okay, flies are also pollinators, which I did not stick a fly up here. But pay attention to what you see on your flowers. They're there for a reason. Now they may be a predator or they may be a pollinator. Either way, they're there to do a job. Okay, so those are the things that you want to cultivate as you move forward. Right? Any questions? Yes.
I think one of the things that, as a landscaper for almost 50 years, that I've realized is that the dandelion has a lot more to offer than the lawn did.
Right.
And most people would just wait, if they have to spray them, till after May.
Mm-hmm.
They would help the bee population out.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't realize that when they do spray it, the first thing they do is seed out, and then that comes up in the fall anyhow.
Right.
So you're not getting rid of them.
I know. I mow them, and I'm like, I got you. And then pretty soon up pops the stem, and then I got my and I'm like, oh, dang it, I didn't get you.
So I think that we need to rethink a lot of the weeds and the stuff of the benefits of them. And if you think about it, years ago when you drove your car down the road, your windshield was full of dead bugs.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time you had to turn your washer on to wash your bugs off?
I have to do it a lot, but I
Well,
live in
you're
the
lucky.
country though.
We don't really have a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
of wild bees that I know of, or bugs that you used to have.
We have a lot of native bees, but I think the population, as with all populations, it ebbs and it flows, right? Now, because we have used a lot of pesticides, okay, and especially if we're talking about insecticides, which it's in another
Yeah.
thing, another slide, but we can touch on it now. Insecticides tend to be broad spectrum, which means I cannot just control grasshoppers. It's going to be anything that eats that leaf, which is going to be a caterpillar. It can be a whatever the thing is, right? A potato leaf beetle, whatever the thing is, Colorado potato leaf beetle. But in addition to that, when we start controlling weeds, i.e. dandelions, whatever it is that you want to control, now you're taking out the food source, right? And grass, although it does pollinate, somebody told me once it's like famine food for pollinators.
Last thing.
Yeah, it's like They're starving, they need something to eat, but it's not going to get them plump and juicy to get through the year, okay? And especially bees. We planted our pollinator plot in Lingle. We didn't have it. They kind of got, it was like, oh, congratulations, you have a pollinator plot. And I went, oh, I don't know what to do with my hands. Oh gosh, right? And so we did that. We arranged them in a 1 and a 2 and a here and a there. And we got pollinators, but I don't think that we got the number of pollinators that we would have gotten if we would have planted in clusters. Also, it makes a better show of the flower if there's a bunch of them there than if it's just like one plant, you know. Makes it also easier for pollinators to locate their food if there's a cluster instead of hunting and bebopping around, okay? Because flying takes a lot of energy, and they don't necessarily have a lot of energy to spare. Butterflies only live like 24 hours, 48 hours sometimes. So keep that in mind. When you're planting, this seems intuitive, but I'm gonna put it in, I put it in there anyway. Plant the taller plants in the back or along fences or along buildings, okay? That's gonna also create that vertical height, okay? Plant the shorter ones in the front. If you plant the taller ones in the front, you're not going to see the shorter ones in the back. Guess what? If you can't see it, your pollinator friends are probably not going to see it either, right? Consider support for any climbing plants that you may have. A lot of people have clematis. That's fine. The clematis is a climbing plant, right? So you've got to have some support for them, right? If you have delphiniums, they like to lodge, especially the tall guys. They like to lodge. Anybody grow peonies? What do those things like to do? Right? I mean, they're beautiful until they're laying on the ground and you're like, well, that's not good. So pay attention to if those plants need any support. Okay, whether they're 2 feet tall, whether they're 10 feet tall, doesn't matter. Also, think about putting pollinator-friendly trees and shrubs. We kind of talked about this, but this creates a nice natural boundary. You're not trying to keep anything in, but you're trying to give them like an arena, right? Just go around the arena, see what you can see, okay? Also protects against wind, because we know we don't have wind here. In addition to that, the other thing that that's going to do is that's going to hold any moisture in terms of snow. It'll hold that in there, right? And then what does the snow do? It's going to melt, and hopefully it's going to go down into your soil profile, and it will water any of those perennial plants that you're overwintering. Okay, because winter watering is kind of an important thing in Wyoming also. All right, yes?
And then I think another is continuous bloom.
Yes, continuous bloom. Mm-hmm.
Go from your early to your later so that they have food all.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say in the last one, and I skipped over it. So thank you for bringing us back on that. Continuous bloom. You start in the spring with the bulbs, right? Tulips, hyacinths, daffodils, crocus, grape hyacinths, whatever it is that you're wanting with the bulbs. We had bees out. We had the teeny tiniest little daffodils, and the bees were already out all the way through the fall. All the way through the fall, because you want those pollinators to get as much nutrients as you possibly can. Okay? This is what we mostly forget: provide water source in our gardens. And we don't think that insects, we don't think about them needing to drink, but insects also need to drink, okay? They also use it as temperature regulations because they don't have a circulatory system like we do. So that's important. It's important to provide the source of water in your habitat, and you're going to want to nestle it into and around your plants. Now, it can be any source of water. It can be a pond. It can be a bird bath. It can be whatever it is, but there are some components that if you're going to have a water component in there, you need to consider for your pollinators. You need to nestle it in the flowers or in the plants, okay? And you need to have something in the water as a landing pad for these insects, okay? This can be anything. It can be anything. For butterflies, they put fruit out. They put sponges out. These guys, I just found this on Etsy. You know, you can find any sort of thing that holds water in Wyoming that probably would last like a day because it would evaporate, right? It needs to be shallow for your pollinators, okay? And they have to be able to land in it. Anybody watched bees drown because they get stuck in the water and they can't get out? This is why we put these shallow items in there. Yes, Donna? Okay. Corks, rocks, anything. Okay? And what it does is it also provides protection from predators. So you don't want to put it out in the middle of your garden because birds like to eat insects. Okay? So just think about that as you move forward. Okay? All right. Habitat features. Here we go. When you're thinking about it, you need to include shelter and nesting sites, and that can be anything from shrubs, rocks, trees, logs, native grasses, any of these types of things. Okay? And I love this picture, and I really want this at my house, but haven't quite convinced my husband that termites are worth it, so there's that. And if you can nestle those rocks in the middle of your pollinator or in the middle of your flowers and make it look more natural, you know, that also gives insects a place to land, to warm up in the mornings. All right. Incorporate features such as bee hotels, butterfly houses, bat houses, nesting sites, any of this thing. There's a lot of ground nesting insects. Okay? I know a lot of you are taking notes here, so I won't I thought I was a little worried because I didn't think I had enough material. Now I think I have too much material.
No, that's great.
Okay? So consider seasonal interests, various bloom times, okay? You want season-long bloom times because you want to give those pollinators enough food. You need, think about colorful foliage or interesting texture of foliage, okay? Think about what your garden's gonna look like in the winter. So in these images, I went from the bulbs to the spring. No, well, this is the summer. That's the spring, summer, fall with the chrysanthemums, and then winter, right? A lot of us probably don't take into consideration what our gardens are going to look like in the winter. And so that's where those structural pieces really help, right? Also, do not get excited about clearing off the dead material, the dead foliage too soon, because that creates habitat for your overwintering guys. Okay? I get real wound up and I want to rifle through and see if my little flowers are growing, and then I have to push them back together because it's normally March 15th, and that just doesn't work in Wyoming. Okay? Pathways and access. Think about putting some pathways through there. Number one, this allows you to move through your garden and observe your pollinators without let's say minimal disturbance. But then also, you can get your gardening tools through here. Think about that. If you take wheelbarrows through, you need to put out more mulch, okay? So make sure that it is wide enough for you to get through, and any maintenance materials you also need to get through. And this is probably one of the most important things I would like to put out. Make sure it's water permeable. okay? We do get some moisture sometimes in Wyoming. So you want to make sure that that water is able to get through that material. Now, this has flagstones, so it's not going to get through the flagstones, but it can be incorporated around that flagstone, and then water will move sideways. Okay, so don't put a ton of cement in there. Don't recommend that. Rocks, pebbles, river rock, flagstones, all of the above. Okay? One of the more important things, maintenance plan. Okay? You need to consider a maintenance plan in your thought process. How are you going to water? How are you going to weed? How are you going to deadhead? Mulching, pruning, cleaning out any nesting structures. You want to regularly monitor for any pests, diseases, and invasive species, because that is what is going to keep your pollinator habitat healthy. Okay? What you're going to want to avoid is pesticides and tillage as much as possible. And then, of course, you're going to want to educate others. Okay? So I think that wraps us up. I know, I got real excited, right? And I thought didn't have enough. So that's going to basically wrap us up. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I'm the educator in Goshen County. Jenny Thompson, like I said, and Donna Hoffman are both really good sources also. I know David is a super bug nerd with me, so we can help you guys out. And thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it.